it seems like the Israelis kind of painted themselves in a corner. They're between a rock and a hard place because either they, if they don't have a real retaliation, something that Gallant said that was going to be surprisingly precise and destructive. If they don't do that, then they've lost their deterrence. It's kind of an admittance of failure that they're not able to, they don't have regional dominance. They can't just bully people around, and all of a sudden they look very vulnerable. But then if they actually do carry out this attack and it's successful and they take out, let's say, a nuclear plant or some of their oil fields in Iran, then Iran has shown that they can hit Israel, and this was just a taste with the last one, and now they can knock out all of Israel's energy infrastructure and really devastate Israel. So it seems like no matter which path they choose, they lose, right? Like they
Hmm.
can't keep, they're going to try to walk this line between doing something too big, but maybe they're not able to even do something big if they wanted to, and then if they don't do anything big enough, then they look weak, and that's an admittance that they lost, right? They don't have escalatory dominance. They aren't able to do whatever they want, even with the U.S. backing. They may not even be able to get it done and do this. The U.S. doesn't want it. So, how do you see this playing out? What is this? Do you think that's what's going on? Is this calibration between what's possible, but we can't do too much, or
Well, I don't think that Netanyahu is worried about doing too much. I think he wants to do too much. The purpose of this, of picking this fight in the beginning, and it's clear that he picked this fight, right? I mean, the provocations against Iran were just, were horrific, and in the end, after, the assassination of Nasrallah, and people forget there was an IRGC general, the brigadier general, that was killed in that attack as well. It just became absolutely imperative for Iran to respond, and Israel knew that. I think that was at least half of the purpose of the Nasrallah assassination. It clearly was the intended. It was the purpose of that of the assassination of Hania in Tehran. So anyway, he picked this fight, and I think with the purpose of going up the escalation ladder. And that's what he wants, because he wants to bring in the U.S. I think he understands that Israel by itself can't win this war, but he's always had this dream of overthrowing the Tehran government, and using the Israeli language, cutting off the head of the snake. That's always been his dream. That's been his stated goal for decades now. And I think he's seeing his only chance. He's always known that Israel is not capable of doing it on its own. But if we can bring in the U.S., so if we go up this escalation ladder and Iran does some real damage to Israel, I mean, just like, takes out an oil terminal and a nuclear power plant or something that, Israel is a small country, much smaller than Iran, and they don't have to take out too many facilities to cause real damage to the civilian and military infrastructure of Israel. If he does that, there's going to be all kinds of cries. We see like what recently Hezbollah had a successful drone attack on a military facility south of Haifa. And there was just all kinds of sob stories in the Western media. I mean, it's ridiculous because at the same time, almost exactly the same time, Israel had just, wiped out this people patients, say, outside of a hospital, and you could see them burning alive in their beds. It was just a horrific, horrific attack. But that received very little coverage. But the successful attack that killed, I think, at least 4 soldiers at that military facility south of Haifa received a lot of attention, and it was so poor Israel. Now imagine if there's a truly large-scale attack. That was a really very small attack by Hezbollah, but a large-scale attack by Iran. You imagine the hue and cry, the sob stories. Poor little Israel. We can't just stand by. We have to defend them now, right? And I think that's what Netanyahu is banking on. It's a very, very reckless course of action, but that seems to be that's the course that he's been on. It's the only way to explain his behavior vis-a-vis Iran over the last several months. And it's consistent with his stated goals throughout his life, throughout his career.
But those four people that died, they were IDF soldiers, right?
Right.
They're
Of
IDF
course.
soldiers in a war.
Exactly.
I mean, so, I mean, obviously, if you
They were legitimate
don't
targets in a war.
right, exactly, they were legitimate targets. So how can they make that, get that sob story and sympathy when,
Yeah.
like you said, they're burning patients alive in Gaza, and
Right.
I just saw
Well,
videos,
it's always been
just
true.
awful
I mean,
footage.
yeah, I know. But it's always been true. I mean, I've followed this conflict since the 1980s, the Palestine-Israel conflict, and it's always been true. It's just that Israeli victims have a human face; they're real people, and when one of them gets killed in this conflict with Palestinians, even if it's just a soldier, who actually is a legitimate target if he's part of the occupying force in the West Bank or Gaza. His picture appears in the newspaper. Back then, we're talking about newspapers, and then there's maybe his mother is interviewed and she's sobbing, and he's a real person, and it's true. I think again he is a legitimate target if he was an occupation soldier, but it's a tragedy for that family. I don't think we should disregard it. So it's not wrong to have this story, but for every, before the Gaza conflict, I think the ratio is generally like for every Israeli killed, and a lot of them were soldiers, 12 Palestinians would be killed. And those 12 Palestinians, they just were never, it was extremely rare that they were real people, that there was any attempt to cover them as real people, to show pictures of them, talk about their lives, anything like that. Just almost never happens. So that's just been the sort. One group is real; they're human beings. The others are just, are terrorists, or you have to say they're, even though until recently, certainly, well, and even now, mainstream media doesn't use the language of subhumans or whatever that the extremists within Israel, and increasing a large portion of Israeli society uses. They actually treated them as subhumans. It's not real people with real lives. So this is just a continuation of that practice. This most recent attack on the military facility south of Haifa.
Yeah, it just seems so reckless. So you think that Netanyahu maybe is secretly happy when these soldiers are killed, or if some civilians die, because he can use this as an excuse to good. He needs to feel his propaganda machine, his political influence, and that's what he wants. And so he actually wants Iran to kill some Israeli citizens.
No, I don't think there's
that,
any question about that. I think that's, just to give you an example, after 9/11, he was caught on tape. I think he said it openly, Netanyahu did, that this was good for Israel.
How do we support this guy? He's a monster, right? I mean,
No,
how
he
do the
is.
Israelis
Oh,
support
yeah.
him?
Well, we do, and it's just with the and our major politicians and mainstream media are completely complicit in this. They know a lot of the things that he said, and certainly that his close allies have said over the years, and they suppress it, or maybe occasionally appears on a back page or whatever, but they don't let it become part of the narrative, a part of who he is.
So he's on tape. There's a recording or some kind of transcript of him saying that 9/11 was good for Israel. That he was.
Yeah, I'd have to dig it up, but it was commented. Again, I don't think it. Some things briefly made it into the mainstream, like the dancing Israelis, right? And then even in Fox News, and then it was taken down. That may have made it in, but it's been forgotten. It's been memory hold. I mean, I don't think it would be very hard to find if anybody wants to go looking for that. It was, among people who were paying attention, it was a well-known comment by Netanyahu.
Do you think the Israelis are aware of that? This is Netanyahu's plan, that he wants damage done to Israel, that he wants them to get struck, so that way he can bring in this war and achieve greater Israel, bring in the United States into this conflict.
I'm sure some of them are, probably the people in the know understand what's going on. I mean, the IDF has to know. I mean, and I think people higher up in the government, they know how the game is played. I really don't think that they're that naive. but I'm sure that there's a large percent of the population that is just very naive and trusts their leadership and believes that that's that Netanyahu has their best interests at heart. And I guess he would argue that he does. He would say that, okay, well, maybe we have to sacrifice some of us to achieve this greater Israel. I mean, he's not going to go out and say that out loud, but maybe that's what he thinks. And I think that is what he thinks. Yeah, I believe.
It seems like such a bad gamble. Like it just doesn't seem like a smart move. And I know Netanyahu's a smart guy.
Right.
Let's just say
smart guys, right? Again, though, they can become blinded by their own arrogance and ambition. It's just there's that old saying that pride goes before a fall. Hubris is what brings about has brought about the downfall of many tyrants and leaders over the ages. And I think this is a textbook case. It's just that, he's blinded by this vision he has of the greater Israel. And he believes that the time has come and, the destiny is his and he's going to do it. And he doesn't want to listen to the naysayers, the people who are telling him the reality. It would be, you can't say it's impossible that he could pull it off, right? Again, the U.S. is very powerful, but even if it is successful, it will be at a huge cost to Israel and to the Middle East in general. It will be and the U.S. And then it's extremely reckless. It's known by no means certain that he can, even with the full participation of the U.S., pull this off. For the reasons that we're talking about. The U.S. itself, its abilities are limited, and the Ukraine war has sucked up a lot of its resources, and it's just not positioned for for any a war of any duration in the Middle East.